Thank you, Wade. Hello. Can everybody hear me okay? Thanks for the great introduction from Wade. As he said, my name's Geoff. I'm from Kamloops, British Columbia. I'm here tonight to talk to you guys something that I'm passionate about. I'm not making any money at all for this. I'm just doing this because I believe that people need to know about this. I think it's important. That's why I drove all the way down here. And I just want to say thank you so much to Wade for hosting me and inviting me, and thanks to all of you for coming out to listen to what I have to say. So who am I? I got a great introduction there. So my name's Geoff. I've got 2 boys. I've got a 5-year-old and a soon-to-be 9-year-old boy. And I want them to grow up in a beautiful, clean, happy, safe country, just like every parent. And that's one of my big motivations for being here and talking to you. I've also traveled around the world. I've been to a lot of different places. I spent the last several years working in Iraq. I've been to Libya, Europe, all over the US, Canada, South America. Spent a lot of time in Asia. So I've been very lucky to see a lot of the world. And that's why I really love Canada, and I appreciate this country so much because it is really one of the most amazing places in the world. So tonight, this is going to be roughly an hour in a bit. If I'm going too fast, please just put your hand up or something so I know. And if you can, just hold the questions till the end. We're going to talk about sustainable development, what it looks like, how does it manifest here in the Sunshine Coast. We'll talk about land and water use, housing, transportation, and then we're going to use all that as a backdrop to get into smart cities, which I believe is what was advertised on the flyer. And we'll talk about some potential solutions to what could be some potential problems. Tonight I'm going to make some claims about sustainable development. Can we do the light? Can you guys see in the back? Yeah? Try to make it better for you here. So we're going to make some claims. So I'm claiming that sustainable development is going to be the most impactful thing in our lives in the next decade. That's a claim I'm going to make. Sustainable development can have significant negative effects on the Sunshine Coast economy, housing, property rights, food production. Sustainable development plans were not created in the Sunshine Coast and do not have the Sunshine Coast interest first. And sustainable development in Canada will not stop climate change. So, I notice in politics now, especially the way that things are really charged, left and right, black and white, that arguments are reduced down to talking points, and this one's a little bit complicated, so we have to look at it with some nuance. So some of the ideas, they come from different places, and they all come together as one. And a lot of the things in these city plans and stuff that we're looking at, there's always a reason for everything. Okay, it's like if you go to the doctor and you say, "Doctor, my hand hurts," and then he says, "Okay, I'll fix that for you because that's my job," and he cuts your arm off. Okay? He did that because he was curing the pain in your hand. But you have to put that in context. Was the pain really worth cutting off your arm? So when you have these conversations, you always have to have the context or else it doesn't make sense. So I'm trying to do that to you tonight. So some things are good. A lot of things in these plans are actually great. Like we talked, this kind of a buzzword now, the 15-minute city. I have a presentation that I did for Action for Canada where I talked about 15-minute cities, and I stressed over and over in there that a lot of things in that plan are good. As more people move to cities, you have to build up and not out. Eventually, there's physical restraints. If you do it in a nice way, you can have a nice neighborhood. There's lots of places in the world that have done it successfully. But there are some things that come along with that you have to know about. And if we don't know about those things, how can we make an educated decision as citizens? So we like to say that it's a teaspoon of sugar. It sounds really nice. Environment, equity, diversity, all these buzzwords, and you think, well, who doesn't want that? But maybe in the details, the devil's always in the details. There's a drop of cyanide. So if you don't know that cyanide's there, it's still going to kill you. So I'll just ask the crowd now, how many people here know what sustainable development is? Who didn't just read it off the slide? Fair amount of people. Typically, at least what I used to think sustainable development was that it was about the environment. You know, whenever it's discussed, they're talking about green initiatives, clean water, that sort of stuff. And that's the way it's portrayed in the media. However, it has now manifested into something else. How many people here have heard of the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations? A few people. So these are 17 goals. It's an agreement with 194 countries around the world. And what I would describe it as an integrated project management and reporting system. And it's pushing policy goals in each one of the 17 areas. So everything from poverty, hunger, health, resources, energy, water, equity, gender, education, economy, environment, everything. But I think, just again, when I talk about context, we need to put it into context. So let's go back. This is an article from Kamloops this week. I pulled this out of the archive. This is, I don't know if you can see that, it's 1991. So at the time, Bill Vander Zalm was premier. He's still around. You can call him on the telephone if you're interested. He's getting kind of old though. Good guy though, he'll take your phone call. So at this time, what they did was they sent a bunch of people around. It was called the Round Table. And they asked people in British Columbia, what's your definition of sustainable development? And they came up with this definition of ensuring that our use of resources and the environment today does not damage the prospect that they're being used by future generations. So we want to make sure there's something there for our kids, just like I want to make sure there's something there for my kids. But at the same time, someone from the Thompson Watershed Coalition pointed out that it's actually an oxymoron. Sustainable development is an oxymoron. Think about this. Walk, running. What am I doing? Am I walking or running? I'm walking. So if you're sustainably developing, you're not developing, you're sustaining. Okay? It's an oxymoron. It's not possible. So if we go back a little bit further in history, go all the way back to 1972. That handsome guy there with the mustache, his name is Maurice Strong. He's actually Canadian. And at that time, he headed the very first environmental conference put on by the United Nations. It was the United Nations Conference on Humanity and Environment. Just a little background on him. He was an oil man from Alberta, very good friends with Pierre Elliott Trudeau. And he later went on to run Petro-Canada just before the National Energy Program. I don't know if anyone remembers that. And then he went on to become the Secretary General of the United Nations. And in 1987, a report came out. It's also called the Brundtland Report. And this is where the term sustainable development comes from. And they came up with basically the same definition that I read out to you. And then you can see the round table in 91. And then in 1992, something fairly significant happened. And this was the United Nations Conference on Environment and, I'll just skip the D. There's a lot of acronyms to remember tonight. So Agenda 21, rather than me tell you what it is, what I'm going to do is use some documents from Canada and from the UN to tell you guys what it is. And there was a meeting in Rio de Janeiro in 1992, and Agenda 21 came out of that. And that was put on by Brian Mulroney, put Canada in that. And there's Maurice Strong. Here's a quote from him. He told us that current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class involving meat intake, the use of fossil fuels, electric appliances, home and workplace air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable. That's what he thinks. So if we go back to 1992, this is from Kamloops this week again. There's a quote, it says, Agenda 21 will be a blueprint for global sustainable development, which will extend into the 21st century. That's why it's called Agenda 21. Does anybody here know what the FCM is? A couple people. FCM stands for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. I think it came into being around 1916, something like that. The idea is that it's all the municipalities in Canada get together. They're federated and they speak kind of truth to power to the big bad federal government, and they get the things for the municipalities that they need to make life better in the municipalities. But I think over time what's happened is they've started to also take messages from up above and push those down to the lower levels, which is not their mandate. So they came out with a report in 1994. It's called the Municipal Primer, and they tell us what Agenda 21 is. And it says that Agenda 21 recognizes that unsustainable development includes suburban sprawl, dependence on private automobiles, and residential development. They go on to say that cities should be using official plans, official community plans, if you will, and they're going to delineate hard edges for development. There's going to be mixed use development, and they want to get away from using the automobile and use active transit. Something else came out of there, and this was the Rio Declaration, and what this is it's kind of like a new doctrine, a new way of thinking. Because now that we've acknowledged in 1992 at this conference that the environment is the most important thing, we've now changed the way that government works. So in this declaration, you say, to achieve sustainable development, that environmental protection shall constitute an integral part of the development process and cannot be considered in isolation. So environmental protection has to be in everything. States should reduce and eliminate unsustainable patterns of production and consumption. And the precautionary approach shall be widely applied, and the lack of full scientific evidence shall not be a reason to not take environmental steps. So there is no proof necessary. And you can see this echoed here. This is the Federal Sustainability Act. So this is put out by our federal government. And they're telling us here the basic principle that the principle of sustainable development is a continually evolving concept. It cannot be defined. And they also go on to tell us that it integrates environmental, economic, and social factors. So now this is kind of our first hint that it's not just about the environment, and that it's about a whole lot of other things as well. So if we don't know what's sustainable, what's unsustainable? Automobiles, air conditioning, appliances, eating meat, suburban homes, fossil fuels, rural living, farming, fertilizer, flying. So these are all things at one time or another that have been labeled as unsustainable. So what does this mean in practice? So those of you familiar with this, you'll see the nice colorful wheel there. That's the Sustainable Development Goals. There's 17 of them. And there's this nice little Venn diagram that shows the 3 pillars of sustainable development. So you have environmental, social, and economic. And what they're telling you is that the government is somehow going to manage those things, and all 3 of them coming together is going to give you this utopian sustainable development. But what I want you guys to do is think of the abstract concept of what they're telling you. Just break it down to the very base, which is a government-managed environment, a government-managed economy, and government-managed social values. And those 3 things together is just full government management. By the way, there's our environment minister, and you can see he's got the Sustainable Development Goal wheel there. So is this going to solve our problems here in Canada? We hear every day on the news, climate, there's an emergency. Well, for one, most of the emissions from the world, they come from the United States, one, and then the developing world, China and India are big emitters. And the short answer is no. So Canada accounts for less than 2% of emissions in the world. Even if we followed sustainable development and did everything exactly as the United Nations has asked us to, China right now and India are busy ramping up. Okay, they're creating more and more carbon every day because they have a hungry lower class that's getting more wealthy and they're becoming developed. So they're creating more and more carbon. So in the face of that, is us cutting a couple percentage points going to do anything? The answer is no. And then we should also talk just quickly about this concept, which is collective rights versus individual rights. So the difference being your individual rights are defined. Okay, that's why we have a constitution, we have the Charter of Rights, the Bill of Rights. It tells you, although maybe some people believe these days it doesn't matter for much, but you do have those rights. They are there. They need to be defended. But they're clearly defined what your rights are. When we start getting into things like collective rights, when we talk about the entire world's at stake, guys. We have to save the entire world and say, okay, I want to save the world, but it's not defined. When do you know that you saved the world? Where's the start point? Where's the end point? Where's the scale that you balance your individual losses against the collective risk? And if you go to, according to the United Nations, they have their own Declaration of Human Rights, which tells us that rights and freedoms may in no case be exercised contrary to the purpose and principles of the United Nations. So that, you guys can go read that, that's there. And this is the risk when we get into this type of thinking and we start adopting UN thinking in our municipalities. This is where we're going. So what we're basically doing if we adopt that way of thinking is we're writing a blank check. Unless there's some limits put on it, we're writing a blank check saying you can do anything to me, you can take any amount of money from me, you can take all of my freedoms. None of it matters because I've accepted that the fate of the world is more important than me here in Gibsons or Sechelt. So just to recap, sustainable development, everything we do has to be sustainable because climate. It's its own philosophy where collective rights are greater than individual rights. Sustainable development cannot be defined. It's always changing, but for some reason we're reorienting our entire society to meet sustainable development goals. It's a new legal and legislative doctrine. The precautionary principle, there's no proof necessary. They don't need to prove anything anymore. The plans were not conceived or written with Canadians' interests first. In fact, they were written far away by highly paid consultants 30 years ago. Much of our modern life is considered unsustainable, so you should go into this eyes wide open. And it's going to result in more government control and management of our lives. That's what sustainable development is, in my opinion. Oh, right, and it's not going to stop the next climate crisis. So this is a bit of the chronology of how things unfolded in Kamloops. You guys can't see the numbers there. The first one up at the top is called the Climate Action Charter. Does anybody know if you guys have signed that here in Gibsons or Sechelt or the SCRD? You probably have. I'm sure you have. So it's an ideological charter. It's non-binding, it's not legally binding, and it says we agree that there's a climate emergency and we need to do everything we can to stop it. And once you sign that, it gives you access to government funding for climate projects. So if you're a good councillor sitting on the team or the SCRD board, or you're in Gibsons, you want money, that's a good thing to get on. You're probably going to get behind that. There was a Green Communities Act, which required cities to start reporting their greenhouse gas use. In 2010, Kamloops, we put out a plan which was almost like the SDGs, and then in 2015, Canada signed up for the Sustainable Development Goals. And in 2021, during COVID, Kamloops released our Community Climate Action Plan. And I understand that the SCRD is currently putting one forth. So what does this look like? Okay, this is specific to Kamloops, but you could just change the names of these, and it's going to be the same for the SCRD and for Sechelt, for Gibsons. You have a main plan at the top, that's your official community plan. And what that acts, and that's legislatively required by the Local Government Act. I think it's from 1998. So every municipality has to do that, and it's kind of like an overarching bylaw or constitutional bylaw, and it's not specifically detailed, but then they can release other plans like a transportation plan, a development plan, agricultural plan, and so on, and those can be very specific. And as long as those plans don't interfere with anything in the OCP, those plans are fine. But it sets the policy for the municipality. So if we zoom out a bit, there's Sunshine Coast Regional District. It's on the same line as the SMART plan. That's a SMART plan for Gibsons. And then if you go up one level, we go up to British Columbia. We've got the Local Government Act, the Climate Change Accountability Act, the Water Sustainability Act, the Zero EV Act. And if we zoom out even further, you've got your federal acts like the Sustainable Development Act, which we just talked about. We've got the Emissions Reduction Plan, and then that's on the same level as the other 194 other countries, and you've got Agenda 21 and the Sustainable Development Goals. And we all send reports up to the United Nations. So this is the conclusion from that municipal primer report. And down here at the bottom it says, municipalities are also the unit of government with primary responsibility for regulating the use of land. So that's why it's important that we talk about this at the municipal level, because the changes that are in Agenda 21 and the Sustainable Development Goals cannot be rolled out unless the municipalities are doing it. This is an example, just pulled this out the other day. I think you guys are Vancouver Coastal Health here, is that right? Yeah. So in Kamloops, we're Interior Health. They just announced that they came out with a climate roadmap. So what they're trying to do is sustainably develop our healthcare system. And and that's required. I think it's under the Climate Change Accountability Act. So they're bragging here that they spent hundreds of hours, 650 staff hours to write this report. Meanwhile, the emergency room in Clearwater in Merritt shuts down every 7 days. The mayor has refused to pay Interior Health because they can't keep the hospital doors open. He says, why should I pay for it? And look what they're spending their money on. They spent the money on a report that was written by consultants. It looks like every report written by every consultant about sustainable development. It's got all the same buzzwords, says all the same things. And they came up with this roadmap. So there's 21 actions on there. What do you guys think those actions say? Do you think it's talking about healthcare? It's not talking about healthcare. It's talking about sustainable development. It's talking about reducing emissions. The word health doesn't even appear in there. And the very first thing they do is they want to establish a governance structure. So they're establishing a mini sustainable development government within the healthcare system that everyone has to report to, because as we learned previously, everything has to be done through the lens of sustainable development. So we have to view every healthcare decision now through the 3 pillars. Probably not going to result in better healthcare. So outside influence is bad. And then here's Vancouver Coastal Health. I just quickly pulled this off. I didn't find their plan, but they do have a lot of sustainability talk. Probably a good place for somebody to do some research if you're interested. So again, we need some context here. So is it true that the healthcare system creates emissions? Yes. Vancouver Coastal Health says that the healthcare system in Canada produces 5% of our CO2 emissions. Ooh. Okay. But I don't know how it is out here, but I know it's like in the interior right now. We're struggling for nurses. We don't have doctors. I don't have a family doctor. You know, if I go to the clinic, I've got to get there an hour and a half early, and I'll be the 3rd person in line. There'll be 42 people there waiting at 9 o'clock before the doors open. You know, this is the reality of the healthcare system. So why are we spending any money on this? And how is this going to make healthcare any better? So what's more important? So this comes back to collective rights versus our rights. Don't we have the right to get healthcare? And are you willing to sacrifice 30% of your healthcare to get a small 2% increase in climate change? Does it make any sense? Nobody's putting it in context. So what does sustainable development look like here on the Sunshine Coast? Gibson's has joined something called the Race to Zero. This is an international group of over 1,000 cities. It's connected with the United Nations, the C40 Cities, the Global Covenant of Mayors, the United Cities and Local Governments. And the SCRD is currently in discussions. I think they're about to release their Community Climate Action Plan, and that's being done through the lens of ICLEI, through their BARC framework. So we should probably figure out who's the C40 City group. So here, it initially started off a few years ago. It was the biggest cities in the world. They agreed they had to do something. They said cities are the most important parts in the world. They have the most population. They have the biggest part of GDP. So they all decided to get together and see what they could do about climate change. And right now, they say that they represent 900 million people and 36% of global GDP. So it's a substantial organization. And this is what they advocate for. Has anybody heard of this report? It's the future of urban consumption in a 1.5 degree world. It's made the rounds on social media. So here they're advocating for interventions. They say that food consumption in our current state is unsustainable, so we need to intervene. And what they're saying up there is that the progressive target for 2030 is that each person is going to eat 16 kilograms, but the ambitious target is 0. So they're planning for 0. Okay, here they're talking about interventions into your clothing consumption. The progressive target is 8 pieces of clothing per year. You get to buy 8 new shirts. The ambitious target is 3, because environment. This one's really interesting, and we'll come back to this again. This is transport. So they want to intervene into transport. They're saying that currently their target is 190 people per 1,000 on a vehicle, but their target for the future is 0. And we'll talk more about that. So who's ICLEI? ICLEI was created in 1990. It stands for the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. In 2003, because they recognized that sustainable development is more than just about the environment, they actually changed their name. Now they're Local Governments for Sustainability. And they get funded from all sorts of places. One of them is the United Nations. It goes to ICLEI Canada, and ICLEI Canada gives money directly to the FCM, and the FCM runs their Partners in Climate Change program. So that's a direct link. This is from their founding document, and it says that in order to secure an environmentally sustainable future, the world's local governments must begin to restructure social and economic life at the local level. That's what this is about. It's restructuring social and economic life. They go on to say that a restructuring of human society at local levels is necessary. And these are all their member cities. You can see they're all over the world. And their membership is secret. Since you guys don't have a climate action plan, well, you do. You have a draft plan right now, but I don't know why the PDF document was unsearchable, so I had a hard time going through it. I'll just show you Kamloops' plan. So yours will be somewhat similar to this. I've been through many cities in the United States, all the way down to Texas, New Mexico, up through Nebraska. It's all the same. They have the same plans. It's going to advocate for something called smart growth, expensive zero carbon building, and removing roads and infrastructure. They call it opportunities for freeing up space because you won't have cars. And it opposes things like rural development and expanding vehicle infrastructure. It came out in 8 big moves. Low carbon development is talking about how we're changing the building code to save CO2. Car light community is talking about designing roads for less cars and active transport. Zero emission transport, that's going to EVs. Zero carbon homes and buildings. This is the change in the BC building codes, and it also talks about zero waste in the circular economy, and we'll touch on that briefly. So this is what they showed us. You see here in the gray, this is the emissions from houses, and up in the blue is the emissions from cars. And you can see that it goes to zero. And where we are is just, you see where the blue graph starts coming down there? That's about 2023. So they figure by 2050, we're gonna have zero emissions from vehicles. And the way things are going, to right. So this is when I got involved in the story. People asked me tonight, they said, how did you get involved in this? Well, I saw some information on this, and I get quite frustrated reading things online. I hear people say things, and I think, okay, show me the money. No one ever shows me the money. I hear someone else say, all right, yeah, okay. Okay, show me the money. No one ever shows me the money, so I went looking for it. The first thing I did is I printed out the climate action plan, and I went into the city, and I had a conversation there. And I said, 80% reduction. Is this just pie in the sky? And I said, it's ambitious, but we think it's actionable. We didn't make a plan that is just for looks. We think we can do this. I said, okay, but 80% is pretty extreme. He said, yeah, it's going to be a tremendous challenge. I said, I know. That's why I'm here. I don't see how we're going to do this without completely reordering our economy and society. And he says, well, yeah, some of the technology doesn't exist yet. And I said, I know. That's why I'm here. I don't see how we're going to do this. And then I got this comment, which is the only thing we've done similar as a society is our response to COVID in the Second World War. So that's talking about sustainable development. That's what sustainable development is, guys. Now here's waste. So in Canada, we have not one bin, but 2 bins, but 3 bins, okay? We have a garbage bin, a recycling bin, and we recently got an organics bin. And a lot of people were pissed off because it's 3 bins. What are you going to do with that? And then what they did was they changed the garbage collection schedule. So now it's every 2 weeks. So you've got garbage, organic garbage sitting out there rotting in your bin, and then you've got your normal garbage sitting out there for 2 weeks. And they have a target, the C40 Cities and Sustainable Development is a circular economy. They want zero waste. So their target is 90% reduction of garbage going to landfill by 2050. And how are you going to do that? Well, you could compact the garbage in your house manually. You could do that. A lot of people are doing that to try and get everything in the bin over 2 weeks. Challenging for some larger families. You can recycle more, so it forces you, they're changing your behavior, they're forcing you to recycle, which, frankly, might not be a bad idea. But the other side is, how are we going to reduce it by 90%? That means we're consuming less. That's the only way that's going to happen. If you're not producing any garbage, it's because you're not consuming.
All right.
So let's talk about land use and development. In the Kamloops Climate Action Plan, we've got some terms there talking about it. And I want to pull up the municipal primer again. And the municipal primer was written 30 years ago about Agenda 21. And this is our land use plan in Kamloops from 2021. There it says mixed use development, mixed use development. Transit and active transport, transit and active transport. Growth boundaries, growth boundaries. This is from our official, or this is from the climate action plan under the official community plan, and there's telling us to make an official community plan. And by the way, this one here at the bottom, this is interesting. It's called the Natural Assets and Green Infrastructure Management Plan. So if you want to manage something, first you have to inventory everything so you can control it. So it's just government control. That's basically, it's just a euphemism for government control, and that's out of the SCRD Climate Action Plan. All right, so we're getting closer to some other ideas. Smart growth. This is right out of the OCP for Gibson's, and they're all euphemisms for the same thing. It's a planning style where we just build up. We no longer build out. We say this is a hard boundary. Anything past that boundary that's low density, we're just going to keep that the way it is. We're not going to let you build anything out there. And they have all sorts of reasons, like it costs money to build infrastructure. It's cheaper to do it in town. And then they just densify and they go up. But you guys notice here in this diagram, this beautiful picture that you find online, that there's something missing? Yeah, there's no cars. Okay, so they're telling us that we're going to do smart growth, and smart growth is a concept where there's little to no cars. Agenda 21 said we need to get rid of the car. We're starting to see a pattern here. So other names for this would be like complete streets, mixed use development, stack and pack, urban densification, complete neighborhoods. Then we start getting into these other terms like 15-minute city, smart city, intelligent city. And this is the new buzzword for the last 2 years is resilient city. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that smart growth is sustainable development. And this is from, you guys remember that report from 1987? This woman here she was the Prime Minister of Norway. Her name is Brundtland. And there's a report where they came up with the definition. And this is right from the Gibson's website. Okay, and it's telling you that. It says sustainable development as coined by the Brundtland report is commonly defined. And it gives you the definition, and it talks about smart growth. I won't read out the definition again. But if you guys are interested, you should research this woman and find out what she did after this report and what other organizations she was involved in. So right now, the Sunshine Coast Regional District is working on a community climate action plan. There's the link right there, and after I'll print this out as a PDF, I'll give it to the hosts. And I think if you signed up for an email, maybe they can send it to you guys afterwards, so you have this. So this is the Sustainable Development Manager, and you can reach out to him. And here they're talking about integrating the sustainable development into everything. That's a part of their climate action plan. But these consultations are still open. Usually what you're going to see is a pattern like this. There's not going to be any mention of negative effects on the economy. They're only going to focus on how it's going to boom the economy because there'll be all this investment from the government and grants. There's going to be green building. It's going to create jobs. Okay, they're going to come out with something and they'll say what we heard. And they'll say that we heard that people are concerned about safe bicycle lanes, and they're concerned about air pollution, and they're concerned about the environment. It'll be those same three things or some variation of that. It's the exact same thing in Dallas, Texas, Austin, Texas, same thing when I was in Colorado, same thing in Salt Lake City, almost word for word. And then they're going to come up with a plan, and then they're going to have some sort of meeting with you guys, and they're going to say, would you guys like white, off-white, or eggshell white? And it's going to be a chance for the community to get together and have your voice heard, and you're going to get to choose which plan you're going to use. But the reality is the decision's already been made, but you guys are actually in a great position here because if I read right, this is just in the draft stage, so you have time to have input. It's a great time to get involved, especially now that you're armed with all this new information. So when we talk about land use, one of the big things right now is land conservation. So this is from the SCRD website. All the blue areas are conserved because they're watersheds, they're environmentally sensitive areas. So this is conservation through bylaw. Now, if you take that and you overlay it with this guy here, that's the ALR land. You can only develop on the stuff that's left in between, so it becomes less and less. We can also conserve land through covenants, and covenants are special because unlike a contract, the covenant stays with the land, okay? So if you make a covenant on a piece of land, you say, I want this to be here for the future because of the frogs or the trees or whatever, doesn't matter. If you die and you sell the property or your estate takes it, that covenant stays with the land forever. So once you put it into a conservatorship, it stays there forever. This is all the land that's been conserved in Canada. We'll zoom in on BC. I don't know if you guys can make it out, but there's two colors, there's dark green and light green. The dark green is all the new land that's been conserved since 2017. And this is a report that we voluntarily send to the United Nations to show them how good we are. So is there a war on farmers? A lot of people think there is. So if we sustainably develop farming, we can't use fertilizer. Well, why can't we use fertilizer? A lot of fertilizer comes from the petrochemical industry, so that's bad. And other fertilizer releases nitrous oxide, which is 250 times worse than carbon dioxide. So that's the reason why they want to get rid of it. And it's also bad for the water. Of course, the opposite effect is that we run out of food. We don't have fertilizer. And they came out with a plan here in Canada. They wanted to regulate the farmers. You guys remember this? Not too long ago. They said it's going to cost farmers $48 billion. And they did some consultation, and because of what was happening in Europe, they backed down here in Canada. The farmers told them to take a hike. But the problem is that we're still committed to make these reductions, and they can only come from certain places, and agriculture is a big emitter. So the government has signed a treaty, the Climate Accord, and they still have to get rid of this emission somehow. Sustainable water management, another aspect of sustainable development. So there's a KPI, it's called Integrated Water Resource Management. It says here that it helps protect the world's environment and foster economic growth. How this manifested in British Columbia is through something called the Sustainable Water Act. And you can see some videos. Is anybody here familiar with what's happened with the farmers in Westwold? You've heard of that? Great videos. So what the Sustainability Water Act does is it gives the government, the provincial government, the ability to turn off the water. So based on the drought levels, they can just say, you're shutting off the water. But because of the precautionary principle, there's no evidence required. And it's right here. It says that it's basically up to the minister to decide. Okay, now all the municipalities have municipal water licenses, so the province effectively can shut off the water to towns now. And what they're trying to do is get everybody with a ground well to register your ground well, just like the farmers all registered their wells for farming. And then now they're shutting down the farmers. Even though the water table hasn't gone down, they're shutting it down based on surface level droughts. Zero carbon future. It's another aspect of sustainable development. By 2030, new buildings will have zero carbon. It's not net zero carbon, so it's no gas, no wood burning. That's not going to be allowed in British Columbia. We have a step code where it's going to increase in efficiency step by step until 2030 and then zero. We also have a goal to retrofit all the old buildings. So a significant source, if you remember that chart I showed you earlier for the Canada's climate plan, was from housing. They want to retrofit 2% of houses each year going into 2050 because of the environment. And to do that, I don't know if anyone here has ever done a renovation, on a whole house, but it's pretty expensive. If you renovate an old house, that includes insulation, then drywall, maybe blowing stuff into the attic, you're gonna have to redo the electricity, they're gonna want you to put in an EV charger, and there's gonna be a retrofit code coming that's gonna make this mandatory, that if you do any work on your house, you're gonna have to do this. It's being considered. How are you guys gonna pay for that? The government knows you can't pay for it. So what they've done is they've come up with this program called PACE. It stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. It's being discussed here in British Columbia right now. And you see this triangle? So if you've ever had a mortgage and then taken out HELOC, so your mortgage is first place on the house, it's secured against the asset, that's first place lien, your HELOC is second place. But what the government wants to do is change the law so that the government can have first place. Then they're gonna loan you the money to do the retrofit on your house, so it's gonna be free. And then you're not gonna make payments, it'll just be through property taxes, so the city's gonna collect on it. The city's also likely gonna go into debt, and they're gonna change the legislation so the city doesn't have to report the debt. So the effect is gonna be rent going up, utility costs up, debt, home prices, taxes, and home affordability going down. And it's being discussed at a federal level, and it's also here in the Sunshine Coast program, Sunshine Coast Regional District Climate Action Plan. They want to develop a model code for existing buildings to help guide energy efficiency improvements during renovation. So basically how it's going to work is you're going to do a reno and they're going to tell you, well, you can't just do the reno, you have to do all of this. And this is just one thing. They say, well, there's a housing shortage, we need to build new houses. So this is just a typical old neighborhood. Maybe you got an old house that's sitting there, it's worth $500,000. Somebody comes in, they invest $500,000, then they build 2 new houses. They have to be better, so they have to be more expensive. So what's happening is you're creating more housing, but the price of that housing is going up. Once the zoning changes on one lot, what happens to the other lots? They become attractive to other investors. So what happens to the pricing of all that housing? It also goes up. So yes, it's true there will be more housing, but it's definitely not true that it's going to be affordable. It's just going to drive prices up. So is the province going to ban cars? I got called out on this. I got fact checked. It's happened before. I said that the province is banning cars. They said, Geoff, you can't say that. And I said, why? I said, they're not banning cars, they're just making them illegal. So, yeah, technically they're not banning cars, but they're making selling cars illegal. So over time, cars will be banned indirectly. Okay, there's something called the Zero Emission Vehicles Act. You guys ever heard of that? Maybe some of you have, but it says basically by 2040, 100% of light-duty internal combustion engine vehicles must be, well, they can't sell any of them. They all have to be electric vehicles by then. And the government has gone one step further and said by 2040, they're targeting a 90% reduction by 2030. So that's 7 years, 6 years and a half. Okay, they're also targeting in their Clean BC plan, they want a 25% reduction in the kilometers driven. So it's not just reducing the types of vehicles, they're reducing the kilometers driven by those vehicles. They're going to increase the carbon tax to the highest in Canada, and they're promoting ideas like movement as a service, which we'll get into here in a second. This is a concept called complete streets. It's an inverted triangle. At the very bottom is single occupant vehicles, and at the very top is walking. It says walking, cycling, transit, movement of goods, carpooling, and then single occupants. So this concept in smart growth says, we're not going to spend any money repairing roads unless you can show that there's an investment for walking and cycling. So that's why you end up with all these bike lanes. They say that it's cheaper to build transport for bicycles and walking than it is for vehicles, which is obviously true. But the result is you're going to have, this is from Kamloops, they took a 4-lane road. See, there's 2 lanes over there, it used to be a 4-lane road. And they put in a full-size bike lane, and then they just filled in all these giant cement islands just to take up the space. Doesn't seem much more useful to me personally. So what's mobility as a service? You guys can find this. I haven't found it here on the Sunshine Coast, but this is from the Kamloops plan. And it directly says, this is the transition away from personally owned transportation. So an example of that would be Uber. Say you don't own a car, but you want to go somewhere, so you have an app on your phone, and then the Uber shows up. Or a ride share with an electric vehicle. You just go, you swipe your card, and then you jump in the car, and then you can drive that car for as long as you want, and you drop it off when you're done. That's movement as a service. You don't own it. And you guys remember the goal is to go to zero. And another word for this is also stakeholder capitalism. So this is where people start making the connection with the WEF, because that's something that the WEF talks about. And that's where select stakeholders, corporations, and government will own everything, and you'll just rent it. This is from the Kamloops Action Plan. Big Move 2C, banning full-size vehicles from multiple urban blocks. Restricting neighborhood roads to residents only. Think about how would you functionally do that? What would you have to put in place to ban people that didn't live in that neighborhood? Would there be a guard there or gates, or would it be some sort of electronic system? How would you do that? Temporarily at first, blocking and converting roads. They already started doing that in Kamloops. Thin streets, which is this concept where they block roads off and then they turn them into daycares and green spaces. Just never seen the daycare or green space yet. We've got Big Move 3C, which is zero emission delivery zone. So that means they're not doing it for citizens, but they're doing it for companies. If you drive somewhere and you're doing delivery, they're going to say the last mile or the last 5 miles of town has to be emission free. So how are they going to regulate that? And they're saying by 2050, 50% of trips in Kamloops are going to be by active transportation. So that means 50% of people are not driving vehicles. And if you doubt it, you can go back to the plan from 2010 from Kamloops, and it says right there, one of the goals, how will we measure our success? By reducing vehicle ownership. Here's some highlights from your draft. This is for the Climate Action Plan for the Sunshine Coast. Goal number 12 is shift beyond the car. 30% of trips must be made by walking and biking by 2030. Fairly ambitious. Goal 13, electrify transportation. So they're pushing electric cars here. And this is a question for you guys that you can ask the sustainable and the environmental people here, is whether or not this includes, any of these climate plans include embodied carbon. So that's the carbon that goes into building the battery, the manufacturing, getting the cobalt and all the rare earth minerals that go into your car. And we just heard in Kamloops at our last town hall that it does not. They only measure it at the tailpipe. They don't account for embodied carbon. So it's not actually decreasing carbon. It's just moving carbon somewhere else in the world. So is electrifying everything in BC even possible? I came to this conclusion using a calculator and a little bit of research. And it's a somewhat complicated subject, but this is 150 years of energy development in British Columbia. In 2021, we produced 64 terawatt hours of electricity. This is a bit of a simplification, but it's just so you guys can see. What you can do is a very simple calculation is you take all the gasoline that was sold in British Columbia, turn it to an energy equivalent, and you get 41 terawatt hours. And then if you add on all the diesel that was sold, you get 22.5, and now you're at parity. So to match this amount of energy, you'd have to double the grid. Then if you went through with the climate change plan and all the upgrades they want to do, they want to retrofit the houses from gas to electric, that's another 23 terawatt hours. So that's an 87 terawatt hour shortfall. Now someone's going to call me up and they're going to say, yeah, but there's efficiency differences between electric vehicles, and that's true. So you could probably take 50% off of that. It's just here for you guys to look at, but even if you chop that in half, okay, we still need to account for the economy and everything growing over time, so there's going to be more in the future. And also, we're still short. We're short by a lot. This is Site C. It's probably going to be around 7 or 8 terawatt hours a year. So we're going to need a lot more Site Cs to make up for that. So, do you guys think that we can electrify BC after knowing that? Well, I say don't be so negative, because there is a way to do it. I'll show you how we're going to do it, okay? Well, we need to increase the power output. So Site C is coming online in 2025. But there's no new dams planned, but there is a call for power out from BC Hydro. We're going to have to increase efficiency. So this means going to smart meters and other things, okay? Swapping out old equipment, moving from cars to EVs that are super efficient. But that's only going to take us so far. What we could do is decrease the number of cars. So if there's less cars getting electrified, that's going to ease the load. We could also decrease the number of kilometers that those cars are going to drive. That's going to decrease the load. We could also start doing timed usage, voluntary at first and then mandatory later. Okay, so you can only do certain things at night when the grid allows for it. And then like what's happening right now in Europe, because they went full green and they ended up with no gas because of the crisis with Russia and Ukraine, that Spain, Hungary, all these places, they have mandates on temperatures. So in the summertime, you have a maximum temperature. There's a maximum temperature in the wintertime and a minimum temperature in the summertime. So you can't have your air conditioning, I think it's like 27 degrees in the summer and 19 degrees in the winter. So we can do it, and it kind of lines up with what BC Hydro says. So this is their integrated resource plan. And here they tell us, they say, we have energy and capacity surplus. Sounds good, right? And then you just read on further in the same sentence, is well positioned to serve our customers' province-wide electricity needs for most of the next decade, and this is the key, with additional demand-side measures. So all that stuff I just talked about, smart meters, thermostat mandates, timed usage, those are demand-side measures. It means reducing demand. This is for the South Coast region, that's here. Additional capacity resources are needed by 2027. They're already running short. And here they're talking about the right level of demand-side measures. And what they're telling us here is that if you do too much demand-side measures, it's going to increase bills, that time-varying rates are not well suited, and it's going to increase the risk to taxpayers and make things more expensive in the future. This is what BC Hydro is saying about their strategy if they do too much of it. And by the way, this integrated resource plan, they came out with it in 2021. They underestimated the demand and they overestimated their demand side reductions. So they had to redo it again in 2023. Does that give you the confidence you need for the future? Makes me worry a bit. So the future could be shocking. We'll probably end up with a situation like brownouts like California, time usage, increased rates, and arguments saying that the rates are mandated by the government, but not if we're buying it from that province. And over time, as the load increases, they'll just change the law and they'll increase the price. And it turns out that increasing the price is actually a demand side measure. Okay, how are we doing for time? We're at 45 minutes.
Yep.
Yeah, 8:50.
How are you guys doing? Everybody okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Good job.
Okay, so that was a long road to get to smart cities. Now we're here. So I want to talk a little bit about smart city infrastructure. You've got your smart meters, the smart thermostats, your 5G, the LED lights you've probably seen all the way around town, cameras, radar, sound, artificial intelligence. Right now, Kelowna's going to be the world's, or maybe the country's first intelligent city. And they're actually talking about using artificial intelligence to run some of the functions of the city. So I don't know about the unionized city employees, but I would be a little bit worried about my job. ChatGPT is pretty amazing, I used it. So what I'm going to do here is, rather than me tell you, we'll just play a little video about what a smart city is. And if you could tell me at the start if you guys can or can't hear, just give me a thumbs up in the back, please. Did you guys like that video? Could you guys in the back read that, by the way? Yeah, okay, thank you. So just about that video, what did it say the benefits were? You could save time parking your car. The garbage can would say, hey, I'm full. What was the other? You know where to charge your car. Someone's spying on you all the time in a dark room. Like those are the benefits, right? Some of those things sound pretty good. Like, hey, if I didn't have to drive around for 15 minutes looking for parking, hey, doesn't sound too bad. But if it means that somebody's gonna know where I am the minute I step outside my house and track me 24 hours a day, I don't know. Again, this is what I'm talking about, context, right? You have to put it into context. So that's what a smart city is. And what they want to do is have everything running off of 5G. And that's why you see the big push for 5G right now. And 5G is interesting. It comes in different flavors. There's a lot to talk about with 5G, but I'm not going to get into the health aspects. I'm just going to stick to this smart city aspect. So the big tower at the bottom left, that's called the macro tower. You've probably seen those big ugly things around. Yeah. But how many of you know about this guy here and this guy here? So those are all through your neighborhoods. They're every 100 meters. So I noticed them first in Kamloops. They started going up. First there was like 5 or 10 that went up, and then within a year, I think there's more than 100 they put up in Kamloops.
During COVID.
Yeah, it was during COVID. That's right. So just for your knowledge, that's an antenna on the top. There's the power line. There's a control module that's usually not locked, and there's a little ground cable. So this is how you would identify them in your neighborhood. There's a great little website here. It's called ertyu.org. But if you just type in Canada cell phone tower map, this will be the first result. You go and Google that. And this is, there's Gibson's right there. Look at them all. And there's more and more coming up every day, every 100 meters. So the thing with 5G is the base tower, it's really powerful. It uses as much energy as 75 households. And every one of those small ones supposedly uses as much as a small household. But it only covers 2% of the distance of the old CDMA 4G network. So that's why they have to put it in everywhere. Those all belong to TELUS, by the way. So now we can start talking about this new LED lighting. This is a new one we just saw in Bachelor Heights in Kamloops last week. It's got 2 little knobs up there, and I'll talk about that in a second. This one here on the bottom right, this is from Gibson's, I believe. And you see this little thing on the top. I think that's just a plug. We're not sure, but it's either a plug or it's called a dimming switch. So it's there for energy efficiency, and it plugs into something called a NEMA standard receptacle. So all the LEDs started going in around 2016, and then government started getting grants. It happened all over Canada, all over the United States. It's really happened all over the whole world. Because like we saw in the smart city video, this is going to be the backbone of the smart city. And a lot's going to sit on that NEMA receptacle. So usually it's just a dimming switch. So if you go to the city and you're like, oh, I see these lights everywhere, there's a little knob on there, they're spying on me, they're going to say, no, silly, it's a dimming switch. What the dimming switch does is when the light goes down, when it gets dark, the switch closes, the light turns on, and then when it starts getting light in the morning, the switch opens and the light turns off. It's to save energy. But now you have this infrastructure with all these NEMA plugs on every single lamppost. And here's an example. This is from in British Columbia. This was from Vernon. I couldn't get up close enough to see what it is, but I suspect it's a camera, and it's connected to a wireless box. It's not on 5G yet. That's on a industrial level Wi-Fi. So what other devices can you install? This is from a Canadian company. It's called Livable Cities. You can put speed monitoring, air quality monitoring, noise monitoring, 360-degree cameras, and you can put radar, which tracks your speed. And just to give you guys an idea, now that you have LED lights everywhere, I'll show you how easy it is to install these.
Why is SmartLinks the best tool for your urban data collection? Our SmartLinks solution is extremely compact and rugged, allowing for ease of handling and transportation of hundreds of units on a single truck. These sensors were designed with reliability in mind and are suitable for the harshest environments. Our suite of city sensors can be easily and safely deployed in minutes with no tools needed. They plug directly into the streetlights you already have. The location, high on top of the streetlight, helps to prevent theft and vandalism of your sensor infrastructure. And that location gives a bird's eye perspective of the local area, making it ideal for recording many types of sensor data. From start to finish.
So I'll just make a quick point here. It doesn't matter what brand of light it is. It can be any brand of light in the world. They all have the standard NEMA receptacle. So what he's saying is their stuff can be installed anywhere in the world on any of these lights now. And it's this new standard for the smart city.
Start to finish, installation per pole is less than 2 minutes.
Less than 2 minutes.
Our solution is designed with your privacy in mind. We work with the city to ensure that storage and visibility of data is reserved only for appropriate use.
So I think we can start to see now the potential for all this data being tracked and recorded. And he's saying, don't worry, we'll just give it to the city and they'll take care of it. But did the city ask you guys if that's okay? No. So as far as I know, they haven't put this in your city yet. They haven't put it in my city. But the thing is that the infrastructure has been put in to support this because it's the eventual plan for a smart city. So what you want to do is get out ahead of this. You need to start talking to the city now and educating them on why, or the regional district, why you don't want this. Because when it does come out, it's going to come out not with, I'm not going to say, we're putting this all in to track you. We're going to put this in for your safety. We're going to monitor car accidents. And it's all those reasons that we heard in that funny video.
The easiest way to think of Internet of Things is essentially imagine all the things that you use in your everyday life that you can see and experience, and some things that you don't. What would happen if those things were always connected to the Internet? You're driving around a city, you want to know where the empty parking spot is. Your car is connected to the Internet, the parking meter tells you where the empty spot is and you go and park. Here the concept is of a connected car, where all the things that go in the car that are connected all the time. As IoT becomes more and more prevalent, and as we connect more and more things to the internet, the efficiency gains will be huge. If we didn't have LTE, then we'd have to rely on things like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, which works sometimes quite well, and sometimes there's a lot of interference. Now, when we put LTE modems into IoT devices, now we have the ability to connect these devices seamlessly in every part of the world. When we're able to use LTE in IoT devices, it just makes the vision of IoT happen much faster and much more seamlessly. One of the big areas of impact from LTE would be in the infrastructure of the cities, because many times we want to deploy these connected devices in remote areas and also all over. So for example, we want to have all the light bulbs that are on a freeway connected over LTE modem. So if you detect some anomaly like a car crash, you're able to detect it right away and communicate back.
Okay, so I'm showing you this just to drive the point home that this has been planned for a while and that this is the direction that municipalities are going, whether or not the council knows it. Maybe the councillors, I don't believe that the people in the city or the regional district are evil people. I honestly believe that most people are good people, but most people aren't thinking about things along the line. They just put the lights in because they're energy efficient. That's why we swapped out all the lights. Okay, and we probably got a grant for the government to do that because of climate change, so it seemed like a good idea. Nobody was thinking that they're actually installing the future infrastructure for something that's going to track every single vehicle and every single person. Okay, that was never part of the deal. So if you go into the city council hooting and hollering and you say, you guys are doing this, you're going to spy, they're not going to have any idea what you're talking about because they probably haven't seen this. They're probably not aware of it. Maybe some of them are. Probably not. So how could this be abused? Like with any new technology, it's going to bring some benefit, but it's also going to bring some risks. So imagine a lockdown type situation. We just went through one here in Canada. Imagine what the government would have done if they had the ability to stop you from driving certain places. If they said you're only allowed to drive 50 kilometers a day because of COVID, and then all the lampposts were tracking your vehicle, and you started getting fines in the mail. Like, you think that this is kind of like woo-woo fairy stuff? This is actually happening right now in London. It's called the ultra low emission vehicle zone. If you drive in there without an EV, you get a £12.50 ticket. And people are going there and they're tearing down the cameras. There's other places in the UK where they say you just can't drive here, and there's cameras, and if they know that your license plate isn't from the area, just like we talked about earlier, how do they do that? That's how they're going to do it. So this infrastructure that we've already installed, and it only takes 2 minutes to put a camera on each one of those lights. So they could do an entire street in an afternoon. It only take 2 hours while you're drinking your coffee, the whole street's done. That can be done easily. But this hasn't happened in Canada yet, as far as I know. What's some other risks about smart cities, other than those great benefits like finding parking spots? Well, there's a report, you guys can Google this, CSIS put out a report, and their main concern is that if we move everything over to smart technology, we're concentrating the control of our utilities, our services, all the information about the people in the city are all controlled in one place. And when you have this concentration of data, instead of it siloed with a utility company, some with the city, some over here, now it's all in one place. What if it gets hacked? Okay? Now the city becomes a very juicy target for a foreign adversary. So CSIS recommends that you engage citizens early to ensure awareness and understanding of privacy and security concerns. CSIS says you should be transparent with citizens about the data collected. CSIS says for cities to do their due diligence on smart city technology, including the software vendors and their supply chains, to make sure it's not coming from China. Because a lot of the stuff coming from China can be hacked. It all has backdoors. So this is coming from CSIS. This would be a great tool for you to take to your council, your regional district, when they're talking about installing these devices, or if they are, and say, well, have you done this? And if you are collecting data, where's the FOI PBA? There's something you're supposed to go through in the FOI PBA. Anybody here know what that is? No. Privacy risk assessment. Thanks, Spring. Okay, so why is your council doing this? Like I said, I don't think there's any necessarily bad people in the council. They think they're doing the right thing, they're just doing their job. They have a strategic plan. Council develops a plan based on the strategic goals. A lot of those goals are coming from the province. A lot of the province's goals are coming from the federal government and from the United Nations. And the federal government is making their changes based on what the Paris Accord agreement says in sustainable development. So it's all voluntary. This is one of the arguments. They say, what are you worried about with sustainable development? This is democracy. No one's forcing us to do anything. Well, yeah, that's true. We're all voluntarily driving into a brick wall at 100 miles an hour. It doesn't make much sense. And they say, well, it's voluntary. This is democracy. If you don't like it, vote someone else out. But I don't think people are really looking at it in the right context. And I want to tell you, too, that there is no plan. There's no grand conspiracy plan anywhere. I hear people talking about it. I've been looking for it for months. I haven't found it. If you know where it is, send it to me. I'd love to see it. But what I see are people that use reasons to do a thing with no context, and no one's questioning it. Everyone's like, oh, okay, climate. Okay, just like the doctor example, we're going to cut your arm off to stop your hand from hurting. Okay, there's no overt plan to take your rights away and your freedoms, but it's really likely that it could be used and abused to do that. Sustainability is a good source of funding for your city, your regional district, so, you know, part of the executive job is to get money. They want to get money from the government, so they can pay for stuff for you, so they're doing a good job, so they get elected. That's why they do it. And then you get good media coverage. Is there any media here today? Probably not. So now, I guess we have to talk about solutions here, and I think we need to do a reality check. So like we said, with the example of the spoonful of sugar with a drop of cyanide, If you go into city council and you go talk to the newspaper, you talk to your friends, and you're like, 15-minute cities are horrible, and they look at you just confused. What are you talking about? You don't want to walk to work? Who doesn't want that? You don't want to be 15 minutes away from the grocery store? So there's a lot of things that are good. There's good concepts, and you're going to go against public opinion, and that's how the arguments are being framed. So you have to be able to clearly differentiate the risks and the problems. So you can't go in and say sustainable development's bad. Well, what, the environment's bad? You want to hurt, like, what are you really saying? You know, equity, diversity is bad? What's bad about that? You're going to have to pick out the thing that's bad and argue about that. Otherwise, you're going to lose. And I guess what I'm saying is that this isn't something that's going to happen in the future. Most of it already has happened. It's been happening for 30 years. No one's been paying attention. And those that were jumping up and down, yelling and screaming, but nobody was listening to them. So a lot of it's happened now, but maybe we can change how it's going to happen. So what we don't want to do is run into the city council and start calling them, I don't know, traitors, things like that. I've seen videos where people say that. They're probably not going to listen to you. You don't want to be rude. You don't want to call them names. Start mentioning conspiracy theories, nobody's going to listen to you. But what you might want to do is go in and change your message to the audience. So if you're speaking to a council, you want to speak in terms they understand. Maybe in terms of their strategic plan. Maybe in terms of the OCP. Maybe in terms of the promises they made in their last campaign. If you want to see what your councillor said, just Google it. Familiarize yourself with the lingo and the tactics of the city. Before you go in and start arguing against something, learn about it. Figure out what's here in Gibson's, what's in Sechelt, what's in the Sunshine Coast. And honestly, guys, the city employees in the regional district, they're there to help you. Like, I wanted to know what was in Kamloops, and I stressed out about it for a while. I went and talked to certain people, found out instantly what was there. I didn't know about some of the traffic equipment, I'd never seen it before. I went in, one phone call, one stop at the city, I was there for 15 minutes, and the engineer actually came out on the street with me. That thing? Oh, that's this. That thing? That's, oh, okay. I knew exactly what it was. So solutions. Like we talked about at the beginning, we've got the official community plan, the overarching bylaw. As long as the action plans and the strategies below don't interfere with the official community plan, you can continue to operate by those plans. But if something in the OCP prevents something from the transport plan or the climate action plan, it can't be done. So what we can do is change the OCP. The OCP is only focused on development and sustainability. That's it. Diversity, equity, sustainability, and developing. There's nothing in there about individual rights, privacy. So what you can do is start to add in things like that, common sense language, like where practical, effective, economically feasible, and the most important one is agreed upon by the community. If those words were in the OCP, that would automatically nuke anything that you're worried about with these cameras being put in. There's no way they can be implemented. Okay, I've been talking for a really long time, and I want to say thank you for everyone for being here. And I guess you all came here tonight to see something, and I want to ask you guys, did you find this presentation useful? Can I get a... Yeah? Okay. Great. So now what? What are you going to do? You guys are going to leave here tonight, and you're going to say, wow, we watched this great presentation. You're going to be full of energy and knowledge. What are you going to do with it? Great show. So I'll tell you what I did, okay? When I started this journey probably 6 months ago, I started researching, looking into this. I didn't know what I was going to find. I certainly didn't think I'd be here in Sechelt doing a presentation. Okay, I had no idea. I didn't know the path, and all I did is I took one step forward. It's like, this ain't so bad. And then I took another one, and that's all I kept doing, and now I'm here. And I'm hoping that this is going to inspire you guys to just keep putting one foot forward. And I want to leave you with a final idea on how you can do that. So what we've done in Kamloops is we've created something called the Kamloops Citizen Safety Committee Association. So just like right now, you guys all came together. We have the energy of, I think there's 170 people here, 160 people here tonight, which is amazing. You've all come together. Maybe a lot of you are worried about this and you want to do something, and you're going to walk out this door and you're all going to be separated again. Maybe we could get you guys all together, if we're lucky, by sending emails, and you could sign a petition. We could bring that petition to the regional district or the city, and they'll just go through their normal orders of business, and they'll say, well, that's really nice. We agree to accept, yeah, okay, and then it goes in the trash. It's done, that energy's lost. So what we did in Kamloops is we associated. We've now created the association, we keep bringing people together, we keep having town halls, and we're bringing together more and more like-minded people, so the membership of the association grows. I'm not talking about a private members association, which some of you may be familiar with. I'm talking about just a normal association, which you're allowed to do under the Charter for Rights and Freedoms. You have that freedom in Canada still. So we're a professional organization. We deal with the city in a professional way. We present facts. We don't deal in conspiracy theories and nonsense. And if that stuff does come our way, we try and put it to rest because it's not useful for anyone. We want to find the real facts, real information, and we want to make the changes to the OCP in Kamloops. And we're going to do that through the association. So when I go to City Hall, it's not just me speaking, it's me speaking on behalf of hundreds of association members. And the city is supposed to, it's actually in their manual, listen to associations. So no one's ever done this before. I have no idea what's going to happen, but it's just a suggestion for you guys, and I just wanted to leave you with that. And I want to say thank you again for everybody coming out. Thank you very much. I'll be around if you want to ask me any questions. I'm happy to meet all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Geoff, for coming down, spending the time to put on this presentation for us. At this time, I'd like to ask everybody, we're pretty much done except for the 30-minute question period. So, Tim, oh, there you are. He's the man with the mic. If you have a question, raise your hand. He will bring the mic to you, and he will hold it for you, right? And just make your question concise, short, and sweet. And then Geoff will answer your question. Okay, Tim. There's a gentleman down there with the mask. Jack?
I forgot about the question period.
I just wanted to say that.
Nailed.
Hey.